Hello, everybody. Happy Friday night. Today is January 28th, 2022. I am Mike Barrera, your co host, and my best buddy, my co host from across the pond. We have Dave Miller. Dave,
Yo, what's up?
get into it. How you doing tonight, man?
Yeah, tired. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, I think all of us have had a long week. Been a lot of
Gotcha.
build up and excitement here to leading up to this big signing with Mikael. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name entirely. I think his last name is Ua, right? I know all the chants say Uka is Ua. So Mikael Ua is the newest signing now for the Philadelphia Union. I'm sure I'll learn the name eventually, so bear with me here. But it's basically that historic signing that we've all been waiting for as Union fans. Uh, on top of that, we have other things to discuss, like Sorensen being brought on as a homegrown signing. There are rumors of an unofficial signing so far with the Venezuelan Jose Riasco. So there's been a lot of new faces coming into the picture here. A lot of excitement with only a month to go, and preseason starting in a matter of a week. On February 3rd, they take off against Cincinnati. So Dave, now that you've had a week to kind of digest all these new players, what are your thoughts just from the announcements alone?
I think obviously, I think when Casper left, I think my immediate response was they need to sign a striker quickly because I know Jim. Obviously, he has to say, "Listen, if we do go in with these three strikers, I'm confident because they're his players." I think I said to you that if they lose Casper and they fail to replace him, they're in huge trouble. I don't think people realise just how important his goals were last season
Hmm.
in terms of the season. I mean, I think what the next top goal scorer was nowhere near close to 10 goals. So you lose Casper, you lose fifth. Obviously, he almost scored 20 goals in all competitions. You lose Casper, already on a big hole. You're relying on two players in Corey Burke and Sergio Santos, who struggle to keep fit. So again, obviously, the sign on Mikael Uhre, I'm just trying to get the name going, is it? It is obviously a very welcome addition. And then Jose Riasco, which obviously it's rumoured that he might be signing or is close to signing. He's obviously 17 years old. So I expect he could potentially be more of the Union 2 styled player and, perhaps going back out on loan to Venezuela or something to continue gaining experience until he comes back to the Union.
Yeah, I know it's really so the news broke, and thank you to Mayo Rivera for that nice
Of
gesture. We
course.
appreciate the kind words. So it's as soon as the Casper news broke out, I think everybody kind of held their breath about like, oh crap, what's going to happen now? Do they have the
Yeah.
replacement? They have to have a replacement. If they're just going to let Casper walk away, there has to be a replacement. And what was it, Dave? Maybe an hour and a half, an hour and 15 minutes later, all these
Yeah.
news started coming in about Ua coming into the fold here, and then they basically unofficially announced it shortly after that he was all but good to go for the Union. And then I think the official announcement was yesterday, as when they finally broke the
Yeah.
news there. Yeah, so I know it's
Yeah.
been kind of a whirlwind of a week, but on top of that, one of the more promising signs for the future as well. You mentioned Jose Riasco, but Anton Sorensen was
Oh,
announced as
yeah.
a new homegrown for the Union. He's a 19-year-old Haitian homegrown. He's a 5'6" defender. So he's been with the Union for a few years now. Um, he's made 12 appearances with the U2 in 2022. So
Yeah.
knowing the depth issues that we've had a bit here, or the not the depth issues, but the depth concerns we've had here, what does that bring to the table now for Jim Curtin's bench with Sorensen being brought into the mix?
Obviously, it's another defender, which they obviously do need. I mean, again,
Yep.
we still don't know what's going on with Kai Wagner at the moment. It appears he might actually be staying. There's not been any direct bids from any reports, so that's a good sign. But again, it's obviously depth. Again, he might be another player that we see going off into the Union too at the moment because it's not as if all being focused within the Union too because it's not as if he's a player that is sort of perhaps one of the bigger names that you've heard from sort of the homegrown players so far,
Hmm.
like the Jack McGlinns and Paxton Aaronsons, Quinn Sullivans that perhaps we have heard of before they'd come into the first team. But again, obviously, it seems like a promising sign. They trusted him enough to actually put him in the team for that semi-final, like the squad for that semi-final against or the conference championship, whatever you want to
Right.
call it,
That's right. Hmm.
against NYCFC last year. So they also had enough faith in him in that sense when they were short-handed. But obviously, it's exciting to see another young player obviously come through, and you never know, maybe he makes his mark this year. Be interesting to see. Obviously, Matt Real's signed a new deal. Matt
Yep.
Real is here for the future. It'll be interesting to see how Jim sort of approaches that left back. Is a left back, isn't
Yes, I believe he is. And kind of to your point, last year we entered the season with a lot of concerns with Jack and Paxton and Quinn. We really didn't know what they were going to bring to the table. And I think everybody can agree we're all pretty much happy with how they produced over that year. So you have a lot of optimism with what this academy is able to produce. I mean, obviously, you already have Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie doing great things,
he?
and of course, Brendan right now has just been the talk of the country overall in terms of the U.S. men's national team, as well as all the attention he's getting overseas. So uh, the academy is very clearly working and doing great things. So now I would say the pressure is on to the next round, Sorensen and everybody else that comes up. You
Yeah,
have to live up to that expectation, but at the same time, the pressure's on the academy as well. Was it just lightning in a bottle that you caught with the Aronson brothers and Jack McGlynn, or is this a sustained success that we can
success.
have
Yeah,
here? Because you can argue that Fontana wasn't the most successful academy product that we had. Jack DeVries is out there doing great things. We still really haven't seen Brendan Craig yet that much. So these young
yeah,
players that we've seen kind of grow up in front of us, we've had a few great ones, a few decent ones. So we really haven't had a dud, if you want to call that so far, in my
yeah,
opinion. Everyone's been serviceable at the least. So, the expectations are high for anyone that can kind of call up and sign to that homegrown contract. But with this new roster in place now, I know we have a few players at international duty, but everybody's coming back for the preseason, and the preseason starts in Clearwater. They have February 3rd against Cincinnati, February 8th against Montreal, and February 18th against Nashville.
yeah.
I know it's preseason, so I'm not going to get too in depth with it. But what do you want to see maybe build in this next few weeks with the preseason?
Obviously, I think the big one now is going to be sort of a chemistry and connection
Yep.
between these new players. So having Luar and Carranza, because I mean, looking at it, that it's a big possibility that that is the Union Strike partnership this year.
Yeah.
The starting one anyway. We see Uar and Carranza, both obviously coming in with a lot of well, obviously more Uar than Carranza, but I mean, there's probably some expectation that Carranza can come here and develop. Obviously, his big things didn't work out in Miami, but the big price tag does speak for itself in a sense. It shows that there was a player in there that can be developed into a strong player. I mean, hopefully the Union can be the ones to unlock that with their sort of option to buy at the end of the year. Potentially, the Union have two very serviceable strikers for the top end of the MLS heading into next season, which will obviously be a great sign to see.
Yep.
Um, Again, I think as well after the preseason, it'd be good to see as we said, the homegrown young guys getting out there, the academy players getting out there and getting some vital minutes in the actual first team, connecting with some bigger names. So again, seeing Anton Sorensen, maybe seeing Brandon Craig, Cole Turner, players like that as well, who
Yeah.
didn't really play much last year. But then again, these are the sort of games that they're going to have a chance. The US Open Cup, they're potentially going to have a chance again. So again, this is just a good stepping stone for the younger academy players as well.
Right, so that's what we didn't have last season. We didn't have the U.S. Open Cup to kind of see those like the B squad players play it, and in
Yeah,
some important matches. So that's a great point you bring up there, with even Cole Turner. But there's another name we forgot. There's so many young players to go through. Sometimes you forget a few. So yeah, Cole Turner would be another one, and then the Open Cup. I mean, the Philadelphia Union have historically had good success in the Open Cup. They haven't won it, of course, but they have been to three finals at least. So they have shown that they can get to the next round of that. Now, granted, back when we were playing in the Open Cup finals, I would say that our overall MLS regular season ceiling was nowhere near as high as it is now. It was like, well, if we make the playoffs in the MLS regular season, fantastic. Let's go out there and at least try to win a trophy with the Open Cup. So I don't know
yeah,
how much, um, I guess how much priority they're going to make this. I think their priority right now is the MLS Cup. I think that would be silly
absolutely.
of them to not put that as their top priority. But yeah, I think in terms of the preseason, you just want to get healthy. You want to be healthy. You want to come back to Chester with just a clean mind, a good chemistry. I know from hearing the Jim Curtin press conferences that we've seen so far in the past week and a half. They say that Quinn Sullivan has been playing great.
Yeah,
Carranza is turning heads, and we've talked about Carranza a bit with being that gritty Philadelphia style player who just puts his head down, plays tough the entire time. So we've heard good things about him, about Quinn, as I mentioned, and just the chemistry.
yeah,
As Jim said the other day, it's like we never left. We're just right back at it, back to work.
yeah,
Um, and I guess kind of going now to the biggest news, the biggest signing. Mikael Uhre is the newest player on staff who will be the leading goal scorer, hopefully for this roster moving forward. So for those who don't know enough about him, he's a right-footed player. He's 6'2". He's 27 years old, but his birthday is on the 30th, so he will be 28 years old this year. 186 pounds. So he's a big guy. He's got some size to him. And in the 2020-2021 season, he had 2,700 minutes, 34 starts, 21 goals. They were the Superliga champ. He was the player of the year, and he had the Golden Boot award that year. And then this past season, this current 2021-22 year, he's already logged in 1,200 minutes, 16 starts, and 11 goals, which leads the league with 11 goals already. So he's coming in just ready to rock and roll. I mean,
Yeah.
just like, hey, I'm here. I'm scoring goals. I'm still keeping up my form from last year. I'm ready to get in here.
Yeah.
Um, Now I know Jim has also alluded to having the love of that two strikers up top, those two forwards up top. So I'm gonna read you a tweet, Dave, and I think this will be kind of our next few minutes here discussing the roster. So
Yeah.
this is from, I don't want to misquote this person. This is from Hopeful Duper on Twitter. This was a roster they kind of put together, starting lineup they put together. So it would be Mikael and Carranza/Santos up top. Pick between the two of those.
Yeah.
Gazdag, Montero, Bedoya, Martinez in the diamond, and then Wagner, Glesnes, Elliott, Mbaizo, and Blake in the traditional diamond style Jim Curtin
Yeah.
system. Agree, disagree, additions, changes. How do you feel about
Um,
that particular lineup?
I agree with most of it. I think the big one there is the absence of Leon Flack, and I think
Yep.
I personally think that he probably would start on that team. Over either probably over Montero, or maybe even Bedoya this year. Who knows? Maybe Bedoya. They're going to perhaps maybe Jim actually finally takes a step back and actually gives Bedoya a rest. Actually, load manages Bedoya's game time, because I mean after last year it was a ridiculous amount of games he played over such short periods of times, and playing the full 90 minutes as well. But again, I think we saw last year, even when we had like that full sort of midfield, Jim still found a way to fit Leon in the team.
Mhm.
For many fans, disgruntlement at times. I think again he'll probably find a way to put him in, maybe over Montero, over Bedoya. But I think the only change I'd probably make would be put Flack in there, because he adds a bit more balance into the team.
So that's where I was looking at too, is how would you rearrange this? Because I do think that Santos and Carranza should be interchangeable. You just basically go off,
Yeah,
who's healthier at the time, maybe who's in better form during practice, etc. So whatever that might be in particular. I do kind of like though Sergio off the bench rather than starting. I think over the past year we saw how he is that spark plug off the
yeah,
bench rather than someone who can start and play 60, 70 minutes. I would rather him kind of come off the bench and create that chaos that we have here. We
yeah.
know Gazdag is going to start. I mean, that's just without question, of course, right? I don't think Jim gets off Bedoya playing 80 minutes. I just don't see it yet. Maybe if they notice he's a lot slower than he even was this past season. Not that Bedoya was terribly slow, but you could see that he was not being able to keep up to that speed.
Yeah.
I just don't see him not starting Jamiro in some capacity. That's the biggest problem that I have. I don't see that flying in that locker room, or maybe just with Jamiro in general, to have him off the bench. I do think Leon does have a lot of potential off the bench, but at the same time, I would rather see McGlynn off the bench in terms of an offensive presence who can be creative off the ball from the back. Um, I know Wagner, Glessis, and Elliott and Mbaizo aren't going to get subbed out. So there
Yeah.
really is this issue because you have the three homegrowns of Quinn, Paxton, and Jack. And then you have Leon, these four players who kind of all fit in that same spot. How do you find enough time for all these guys? Really, if out of that list right there, who would you say gets the bottom of the totem pole out of those four players that I mentioned? The three
Um,
homegrowns and then Leon,
it's a tough one.
and you have Corey Burke. I'm sorry, I forgot about Corey Burke too.
I think obviously the big one, obviously, I think that was obviously quite apparent towards the back end of the season. Sort of the missing spark, the missing link was Quinn. Quinn Sullivan was sort of the player that was excluded from that team on towards the back end of last year. He was either not making the matchday team or matchday squad, or he wasn't getting on the pitch, whereas Paxton was starting games, Jack was starting games, or they were both coming on with 15, 20 minutes to go, whilst Quinn was sort of sat on the bench
Yeah,
and never really going on. So I think, again, Quinn was the one that, I'm not going to say took a step back, because that'd be harsh, but he was the sort of one that didn't seem to progress in terms of game time as much as the other two.
yep.
Yes, I'll go with Quinn with that one. I think, again, it it's again going to be a big. I mean, he's only 18, but I mean, again, it's going to be a big year for him in terms of can he take that extra? Can he take that push? Can he challenge Jim for more game time? Can he prove to Jim that he deserves more game time when perhaps, although he is a younger player, perhaps when he has played, he's doing better than Jim Montero or Gazdag. I mean, I think it's been a big year for Quinn. We saw sparks last year, and again, Jim's been so complimentary of him in his press conferences.
He
It's
really
hard to
has.
not.
Hmm.
It's hard to not. I don't know whether it's a good thing. That obviously, again, it's good to see a manager backing a young player, but is it also a bit of a bad thing that it's putting bigger pressure on his shoulders, not just in terms of the expectations Jim has of him, but in terms of the fans as well? Because when you're hearing big things from the manager, you're going to, as a fan, you're going to expect this young player to, perform very well every single time he steps in the field, or to expect something special from a player that obviously the Jim obviously believes that Quinn is a very special player. So I think it's going to be a big year for him, especially considering he found himself at sort of the top end of that pecking order towards the start of last year. He then found himself third or fourth choice
That's right.
towards the end. So it's going to be a big year for him in terms of managing that expectation and trying to force more game time.
Yeah. So I don't want to. I don't want to put him in the same conversation as Fontana, but I do have the sense that he. Well, I guess with the Open Cup now being in play, there is a chance for these young players to have that particular match to focus on, to kind of make their mark on the season in that match. So I'm not going to say he's not going to play nearly as limited as Fontana. And obviously, Fontana had the concussion that lasted an eternity as well.
Yeah,
But I do feel like he's going to get lost in the mix as Anthony Fontana did, because he at first at the start of the season, Fontana was playing. He was playing the Atlanta United game. He played in the CONCACAF Champions League games. He got injured in Atlanta for the concussion. He was gone for a while, and then he just kind of got pushed to the back burner. The same thing we saw with Ilsinho. He got
yeah,
hurt. He got pushed to the back burner. So I do believe you're right. I do think that out of the three homegrowns of Paxton, McGlynn, and Quinn, he is the final in that totem pole of players. So is he limited to only the Open Cup? Do the Union maybe make a move like they did with Jack DeVries? I mean, do they loan him out for a year to a team that is maybe interested? Because I know that now at this point the Union are getting their eyes put on them with their young players, their young products. We have Fontana going out, we have DeVries
yeah,
going out as well. So it's possible that he gets put on loan somewhere. I wouldn't be shocked. I do want to see him play. I think he brings a good spark off the bench, but at the same time, it's a good problem to have. I mean, it's not a bad
yeah,
problem to have this much depth. I mean, look at the forwards alone. You have Ua, you have Carranza, Santos, and Burke. That was a one, two, three, four players right there who can make a difference any given match. And with
yeah,
Carranza's streakiness, it is nice to have one consistent goal scorer in Mikael, and then three players who can kind of like, all right, who's hot right now? Okay,
yeah.
him.
Different.
Who's on international duty, and we're going to see that as well. How many times last season, maybe 4 or 5 times, did we see this team get affected by the international duties of
Yeah,
players being gone? So you have those matches along with the Open Cup matches. So anywhere between 5 to 10 matches that these players can come in and make a difference. But
yeah.
um, when you look at this lineup, I just don't see how Curtin moves away from Bedoya yet. If he does move away from Bedoya, let's just say, for example, Ali comes off a little slow. He ends up not starting well, and Curtin wants to make a move. How would you say you would replace him? Would you put Martinez up there like we've talked about before?
Um, yeah, I think so. I think
I
obviously,
think so too.
I think again, well, like I said on the last show, I think the biggest thing for the Union is that they haven't obviously Gazdag and Montero good they can pick out a pass, but they're not exactly players that you look at who can get the ball in deep or inside their own half and just push the team up on their own 40, 50 yards.
Yep.
They can work their way through players and get the team up the pitch. The only midfield that can do that is Jose Martinez, the player they play deepest. So again, if when he does go on these amazing runs and he pushes up and commits at the pitch, he leaves a big gap between the rest of the field and the fence. So I think it probably would be to their advantage moving them up the pitch. I know that again he can be quite reckless. So again, you have him further away from your penalty area. So if he does lose the ball in a wide position, but you have a player in there that perhaps is able to recover it, whether it's Leon coming in to sweep it up, or if Barzo can come in, or the right back can come in. So again, I think pushing him higher at the pitch becomes a bit of a less of a liability.
Yep.
closer towards your goal, and then you actually have a player who's confident enough to get on the ball and try and make things happen. So I think we saw that a lot last year, and I think that was probably the main issue for the Union at large spells during that sort of those summer months through to I'd say even about October, November, really. Till after they got really knocked out the CONCACAF Champions League was the lack of confidence to try and make things happen in the final third.
That's right.
Players looked reluctant to put the ball in the box. Players looked reluctant to shoot. We saw players from like 4, 5, 6 yards out refuse to shoot, instead stop and try and find a pass instead of just shooting. So I think again, players like Jose, he's shown that he doesn't care where the ball is. He'll try and put the ball in the box. He'll try and dribble past 2 or 3 players. He'll try and make something happen. So I know people get annoyed that he shoots, but when the Union have large spells of possession and get inside the area or get around the area and refuse to put in the cross or refuse to shoot, sometimes I don't mind it. It puts the opposition on their back foot a bit in terms of, okay, we need to expect the shot as opposed to just stand your ground. They're not going to do anything. So it sort of then forces them to come out and try and close things down a bit, although Heiser's not the best shooter. But again, I think, again, as I said in the last podcast, that's something that the Union, I feel, still need to sign. As great as Miro and um, Daniel Casdagar, they need another player like Jose Martinez, but a more attacking minded Jose Martinez that has the confidence to take the ball 20, 30 yards up the pitch, can weave his way through players, and can pick the pass and isn't afraid to shoot and cross the ball. I think that's the biggest thing the Union need now, apart from a bit of pace that they can perhaps introduce off the bench.
Yeah, so it's funny too. When we ended last season, Dave, we both had a good feeling that Jose Martinez and Kai Wagner were not going to be here next year. We were thinking, okay, who's going to be our left back of the future? Who is
Yeah,
okay? Leon Flock is here; he's ready to take over that role for Jose. I think all of us were fine with Jose leaving and Leon kind of coming in and taking that back position in the diamond.
yeah,
That obviously has not happened.
no,
They're both still here. I know Kai. I think if I remember correctly, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he got that much attention overseas as we expected. And
no,
so he's here, he's happy. He seems like he's happy to be here, and obviously he's one of the best left backs in the league. So he's certainly going to make his impact every single game. But we didn't expect him to be here. And now that they are
no.
here, we have a serious depth issue in terms of who's going to get the minutes, who's going to play. Um, so it's I guess it's a good problem to have. But in terms of the players who are leaving, we talked about Casper already. I think everybody's kind of on the fence about Casper. Well, not everybody. I would say some people either like him or they just don't like him at all.
Yeah,
I think you and I have been fair with our reaction on Casper. I thought that he
yeah,
was streaky. He didn't have his best moments. He missed some easy shots, but at the same time, he had some amazing goals for the franchise, and we have to thank him for those moments.
yeah,
But Mikael is clearly an upgrade over
absolutely.
what Casper can do. Um, what do you think, just from watching his highlights, will be his biggest contribution that Casper couldn't do? For me, I think it's his pace and what he can do with
Um,
his feet. How about yourself?
Again, I think the pace, as you said, the pace. I think that was a big one for Casper. He didn't have sort of the pace to close things down. The Union do like to press hard at the pitch. I think that was the biggest issue for the Union last year,
I agree.
especially when they had Corey Burke and Casper on the pitch at the same time. They're um, both not really quick guys. They're both not. I mean, they struggle to get around. Not to say struggle to get around the pitch, but if you know what I mean, they don't get around the pitch perhaps as much as like Sergio Santos does. So again, it's harder to press with two slower guys as opposed to having a quicker guy up there. So having Uwar there, who obviously has a bit of pace, he's still tall. So again, you don't lose that putting the ball in the box, aiming for his head. Again, I think that, and especially the movement, I think sort of the movement on and off the ball will be quite big. Again, I always thought Casper's football was actually really good. So I think that'd be interesting to see what Uwar can do when he gets the ball in terms of trying to make other things happen. But I think the movement off the ball, trying to get in behind, to make runs in behind, which Casper really struggled to do, couldn't really do with Casper. I think that'll be the other exciting thing I'll be looking forward to is that's the movement, trying to move the defenders away, creating space, trying to get in behind. I think that's sort of most exciting thing.
I'm going to add something to that. I think you brought up a good point that kind of reminded me of something. So last year, when Sergio was out on the field, and a lot of times what we saw was Casper was up top with the Christmas tree formation, which I think Jim has put to rest. That's not how we're going to play this year. We're going to go back to the
Yeah,
old way of doing things, so we move forward. But if you remember last season, um, the when the Union were most dangerous was when Jack Elliott and Glessens were pushing the ball up the field and just having Sergio run for it and make something happen with his feet. We saw it in the New England game, at New England. We saw it. I can't remember what it was at the Toronto. Was it the Toronto game? He kind of went off for like the greatest first half of his life. I believe it was a Toronto game this past season.
Probably, yeah.
So we saw it a few times where if you just give him the ball and you feed him the ball, he's more likely going to beat the defender more often than not. If at least put pressure to fight for the ball to get his teammates up there and to make something happen. So we always had that with Sergio, but the problem is Santos was hurt a portion of the season, or he just wasn't playing, whatever. So you just didn't have that option. You basically had the defenders knowing they could just kind of sit back and Casper's not going to beat them. They can
No.
just kind of watch him and let him, just slowly move around the
Yeah. But
field.
I think it's not even that. I think it allowed teams to perhaps push higher up and press the Union
Yep. Hmm.
higher up the pitch because they knew that Casper wasn't going to beat the defenders for pace. He wasn't going to break in behind. So
Yes.
again, they just had to watch out for the movement off him of like Montero and Gazdag. And again, they're not fast players either. So again, it's sort of easy for them to. It was easier for them to press the Union high up the pitch. I think that may have been perhaps one of the team's biggest issues. And some of the bigger games this year on the road, we saw it against teams like
Yeah.
Orlando. Probably that Atlanta United game was the fact that once the hosts of the opposition team got on top, they got on top. The Union couldn't get out. There wasn't
That's
space for
right.
them to do the neat passing they like to do. They couldn't even hit them high on the counter attack because didn't have any pace in that team, which is why
Yep.
I think not only is a striker so important, but having a pacey striker is so important away from Sergio that you can hopefully be dependent on. But getting a pacey sort of winger or wide man out there as well that can put the defenders on their toes, who can make the fullbacks have to drop off or fullback have to drop off 5 yards because he'll need the ground on that pacey player. I think that's what the Union do lack as a pacey player
Hmm.
that allows you to perhaps change system in a game if it's not working. You can use him as a plan B, or you can even start a player like that. And if you know what I mean, you can start players like that as well, and they can be again the difference makers. They lack a difference maker. I know people love Dilcinho because he was a bit more of a skillful player as opposed to a pacey player, but the Union lack that difference maker or that plan B that actually works as opposed to just chucking Corey Burke on and going. Hopefully he does something. Having a player like
Well, I think that's why people miss Fafa Picault because Fafa was that just lightning
Fafa,
fast guy who could just make something happen, and he did make a lot, had a lot of bright moments for this team, and I,
yeah,
I would I would enjoy someone with his speed back on the roster. So if
he
Fafa's
did.
listening, I miss you, buddy. Um, but no, I think you're right, and when you have Casper up there by himself, or even with an alien Sergio who wasn't always 100%, then you got Bedoy on the right side. It's like you're really just slowing down this attack
Yeah,
significantly. So I am excited to have that dual threat up top. This true dual threat to be able to either Jack or Glesnes or anybody else can get the ball, send it up, and make something happen. And it really has to keep the defenses honest every
yeah,
single time. It doesn't matter who's on the field, even unless Burke is on the field, and maybe that's a one person you have to worry about. With Sergio Carranza and Ua, you have that kind of extra bit of pace up there to make something happen. Which unfortunately for Burke, I think puts him the fourth place on that pecking order in terms
yeah,
of the forwards.
absolutely.
But we don't want to have too long of a show. We were going to think about like 30, 35 minutes at the most here. So Dave, we have a couple weeks ago. What is something I'm going to ask you two questions. One, what player do you think will have the biggest improvement this season before we even get to the preseason? Just early prediction here.
Yeah.
What do you think what player do you think makes the most impact? What player do you think improves the most over the season?
So most impacts, I think obviously I don't want to go all out because I think that'd be easy. I think that'd be a cop out. And the biggest impacts.
If you want, I'll go first. I already have mine too. I'll give you a minute to
Okay.
think. I put you on
Yeah.
the spot here. I'm sorry.
No, it's it. Go ahead.
So the biggest impact I think will be Jack Elliott. Personally, we saw him
Yeah.
progress little by little by little over the season, and I think towards the end of the season, you really saw his offensive potential. I
Yeah.
think now you're going to get that the entire season. So you're going to have Glesnes and Jack being fully operational, ready to go. And that's what I think was Jack's limitation before the season again. So I think overall, once the season wraps up, you're going to think, wow, Jack Elliott really is one of the most versatile and best center backs in the league. I think for him would be the most impactful. For the most improved, I would honestly like this to see be Mabizo. I want to see him score a couple goals. I think after a year now under his belt, starting and being more consistent, I think he can kind of shake off the big upset we saw last season to end the year. I think
Yeah,
Olivier can take that next step, and I think he can have what Jack Elliott had this season. I think he can kind of by time the end of the year comes around, have a couple goals under his belt, and just you see that bit of growth. That's what I want to see, just the
yeah.
growth from Olivier to take that next step. Now, what do you think for that?
Well, I think obviously it's funny you mentioned Olivier because I was thinking perhaps I was going to go either him or Gazdag as the most
Yeah.
impactful player. I think obviously now Gazdag's had almost a full season. He's had a pre-season. He's
Hmm.
just a life in the MLS. Hopefully now he can become that key playmaker that Ernest Tanner brought in. He can try. He can link up the play more, create more opportunities for hopefully strikers for two quick or two like creative strikers as well. I think that's the most important thing. Obviously, I love Casper. I think Casper obviously was. Uh, Going to go a bit of a tangent here. I think Casper was obviously. I think people realised how important and big Casper was in terms of the history of this team.
Yeah.
Casper sort of put the team from just the sort of okay they might get the sixth, they might get the fifth seed, they might get the sixth seed, they might win a game. Okay, they're great. They're in the playoffs too. Okay, they're in the playoffs now. The third seed and the second seed, they've got a chance of getting to the championship game. They've he Casper Jaberko was a massive part of the needle mover in turning Union from playoff hopefuls to genuine contenders. And I think people don't
Yeah,
realize.
that's
I
fair.
think that sort of gets heavily overlooked in terms of when people speak about the team and when I know people speak about legends, or whatever. Like Kasper Schmeichel is a Philadelphia, in terms of the young history of the team, as he's a Philadelphia Union legend. He should be in the Ring of Honor. I don't care if it's before or after Ali Bedoya. They're both going to get in anyway, so I think the significance means nothing. He should be in the Union Ring of Honor, and there you go. That's just what my own statement there. But so again, I think Gazdag obviously with more creative players around him,
Yeah.
quicker players as well. I think more consistently quicker players, better feet. I think again we'll hopefully see a bigger role from him. And again in Baza, I think
Yeah.
we saw we saw just how creative he could be last year. So I'm hoping like he was a big part of the team going forward. Jim loves his fullbacks to push up high up the pitch and putting crosses in the box. We saw glimpses of that from Olivier last year. So I'm hoping to see that step up.
Yeah.
Being more confident, the confidence in him to put more crosses into the box with perhaps two taller strikers, putting more crosses into the box, trying to beat his man a bit more often. As you said, hopefully chip him with a couple of goals. So those would be my two most impactful players.
Yeah, I agree. I see. I knew when I picked Olivier in my head, I was like, I think Dave's going to agree with me with him. You see the goal scoring coming from Jack and Kai and Glesnes, but he was the odd man out. He was the one who just never was able to break through. And I think like you and I have already just discussed, I think he will take the step that we saw Jack Elliott take last year.
Yeah,
He's of course an offensive threat, much more than Ray Gaddis ever was. But now it's time for him to kind of take that next step to really be a lethal combo with Kai and him on either side of the pitch. So I
yeah,
agree. I think Olivier has a really high ceiling this year, which I'm excited about. And again, I love Jack Elliott. I mean, he
yeah,
just is a great player, and him and Glessons together again, and then Finley back there as their backup. I
yeah.
think is going to be phenomenal.
Actually, I was going to
Um,
say, quickly touching upon the Basel
yep.
thing as well,
Yep.
hopefully as well, we could see a raise in his defensive game as well. We could see him potentially improve on that. I mean,
Yep.
I think obviously that was a big emphasis, putting emphasis for Jim's. Um, Again, I think Jim knew he had his struggles, and I think that'll be a big point of emphasis for Jim and the coaches this year is trying to nail down Olivier, making sure that he does perhaps focus more when he hasn't, perhaps when he loses the focus bit. I think that might be something that we do see a bigger leap from him in this year, which should be huge. And if you can have two-way fullbacks in Kai Wagner and Olivier Bison, that could be a massive sort of advantage for the Union.
Couldn't have said it better myself, man. We'll wrap up the show with our sponsors, and we'll call it a night. I know
We
both
haven't
Dave and
said
I.
our we haven't said
What?
our unless did you go most improved? I didn't.
What
No,
was that?
I didn't go my most improved player.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, my guy Leon Flack. I think
There we
uh,
go.
Leon Flack. I think again, obviously, seeing some of the reports, he apparently looks a bit more threatening in training this year in terms of shooting and
Yep.
scoring some goals in training. So hopefully that's something he's been working on. Again, I think he's due for another step up. He's only 21 years old. He's only just come off his first real top quality sort of season in football.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping again. I think he could be in for a big break into the team, especially if someone like Ali Bedoya does sort of get edged out a bit and is more of a role player,
Mhm.
more of like a player coach style thing this year, more of a role player. So I'm hopeful that I think Leon can take the next big step.
Yeah, I think last year we were on him a bit too hard with the offensive thing, but he was at times just so oh, sorry, I didn't mean to put that on the screen. He was at times so limiting for the offense. He would get the ball
Yeah,
and basically the offense kind of shut down. He just didn't have the ability to kind of push. So I would love for him to be that most improved player, because if he can put an
yeah,
offensive game together, my God, the sky's the limit for him, because he already is a great defensive player. You see the way he tracks down a ball. I mean, he he does it, like the best in the league, really, in terms of his
yeah,
ability to do that,
absolutely.
and at such a young age too. Exactly. So, Leon Flock, Olivier, Jack Elliott, all these players, Gazdag, of course, all these players to watch. We kind of went into last season thinking it was a rebuild year. It really wasn't much of a rebuild year. I think they exceeded expectations, and they
Yeah,
rebuilt. They rebuilt while becoming a contender, which you don't see too often.
no,
And now this is it. This is the year where all the pieces are here. The players have grown. The players have matured. They have developed their game to the next level. I mean, Dave, this is the year, in my opinion, that if the Union are going to go out and win it, this is their window to do it.
yeah.
These next year and a half, these players are still here. They're on contract, and they're just getting better and
And
better every
yeah,
single.
exactly. There's no CONCACAF Champions League sort of
And that, yep.
thing as well. You don't have to travel to the arse end of fucking Costa Rica or El Salvador. I mean, obviously, great competition, but I think it took its toll on the players during the season, and perhaps was playing their mind a bit mentally as well in terms of how big it was. So, I mean, that could be something that again helps the Union potentially. In terms of the MLS Support Shield, maybe we might see them end up winning it again next year, finishing higher up the rankings.
Yes, I don't think that can be said enough. We no longer have the CONCACAF to worry about, so that will put much less strain on their legs, the
Yeah,
traveling, just their mindset in general. You really saw that bring this team down. But at the same time, I'm very grateful that it did that, because it really matured this team and this franchise, and it allowed them to kind of go through that struggle. And I think
yeah,
this year you'll see you'll see it all pay off. And then as I posted on Twitter the other day, the Philadelphia Union were plus 1,600 to win the MLS Cup. So on was it January 22nd, I put a $20.22 bet for the 2022 season
that's
for
Dutch.
a payout of 343.74. So I mean,
Nice, that's
if
Dutch.
the Union win, I'll take my family out for a nice dinner and just. All right, Dave. Let's close up with our
Also, yeah,
sponsors. Here we have our newest partnership with Triple Threat Bets, a college basketball guy that I've been working with closely. Him and I go daily, every single day, with college basketball picks. We have articles, we have videos. He puts out his own model spreads, awesome stuff. So triplethreatwagers.com for anything and everything with that. Uh, manscaped.com, get 20% off plus free shipping with code AATBirds at manscaped.com. Next up, we have OddsJam. OddsJam is the number one software platform for sports books. Bandits, they use an arbitrage calculator and more, so you never lose a bet again. Sign up at oddsjam.com, the AAT Birds. Next, we have check out Statement Games at statementgames.com for a fun new way to fantasy sports and entertainment. Win gift cards and prizes. It's free to sign up at statementgames.com. We have Law Train watches, lawtrain.com. Use codes AATBirds for 10% off a checkout for some lovely watches. Very cool stuff there as well. And then last, we have the AAT Sports Network shop. You can get gear, cups, mugs, hoodies, decals, a bunch of cool stuff with our show, the Barrera's Bucket College Basketball show that I do from time to time, the Chips and Dish, Burning Bridges. We have all this kind of cool products on there. If you're an Eagles fan like myself and Dave, ton of cool Eagles stuff on there you can get.
yeah.
So check out the aatsportsnetwork.com/shop. And lastly, Dave, we can find you at Dave GFC Miller on Twitter. You can find me,
Yeah,
Embraer1323, on Twitter as well, all right here for you, perfectly on your screen. And we will be covering
yeah,
these games every single week as
yeah.
best we can. And listen, man, we got less than 30 days to go. Let's rock and roll and go Union.
Doop.